as we continue our series, Blood Brothers, the story of the sons of Jacob. We have spent a long time with this very dysfunctional family. Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his older brothers. Jacob, the father, who believed his son was dead for 22 years. Judah, who once said, "Sell him," and who stood before the second most powerful man in Egypt decades later and said, "Take me instead." And the vizier of Egypt, who looked at the 10 brothers who had thrown him into a pit and says, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" And through all of it, God was working. Last week, Jacob called Joseph close and made him covenant. "Do not bury me in Egypt. Bury me with my fathers in Canaan." Now we come to the end of 17 years that Jacob has spent in Egypt with his family. He's dying, and before he goes, he has something to give. So today is part 25 of the series, and it's called The Blessing. Genesis 48, verse 1, it says, "After these things, someone told Joseph, 'Behold, your father is sick.' So he took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him." Now, Nahum Sarna notes that this is the first reference to illness in the Bible. It's not death. He's sick. There's still time. And Joseph, before anyone asks, brings his sons. This is the wisdom that we have watched develop across this whole series of Joseph. He reads the moment before the moment arrives, and he brings Manasseh and Ephraim. Now Manasseh, Joseph named him because God had made him forget all his trouble and his father's household. He thought that chapter was closed in Egypt. He was never going to go back. And he named Ephraim fruitful because God had made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. And Joseph chose those names alone in Egypt before his family ever arrived. He had no idea how appropriate these names would be because God did not let him forget his father's household after all. Jacob's right here. And now the whole family is fruitful and multiplying in the very land of his affliction. His affliction became his family's salvation. Genesis 48, verse 3. Then Jacob said to Joseph, "El Shaddai appeared to me in Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me." So he calls God El Shaddai, God Almighty, the covenant name of his fathers. God spoke it to Abraham when he was 99 years old. Jacob spoke it over his sons when he sent them back to Egypt with Benjamin the first time. It's the name that appears when God asks someone to trust what they cannot really control. Luz is the older name for the place Bethel. This is where Jacob had his dream, the ladder, the angels ascending and descending, the voice of God speaking, "I am with you, I will not leave you, I will bring you back." And the word for blessing, Barak. It appears 5 times in this chapter, and it starts here in the memory of what God said. And it's going to land on Joseph's sons before we're done. Genesis 48 and verse 4, it says, he said to him, I'm going to make you fruitful and multiply, God speaking to Jacob, you and turn you into an assembly of peoples, and I will give this land to your seed after you as an everlasting possession. Fruitful and multiply goes back to the Garden of Eden. Remember, the sons of Jacob are in Goshen. They're in a garden in exile. They are where they are fruitful and multiplying. And God promised that the 70 people of Jacob's family who went into Egypt would become a great nation for the 70 nations. Here he calls them Kahal Amim. But the land God promised that they are not currently in, that is an everlasting possession. Ahuzat Olam, not where they are in Egypt. And Nahum Sarna says that this Ahuzat Olam stands in quiet contrast to what Pharaoh gave Joseph. He gave him the land of Ramses, Goshen, the best of Egypt. Pharaoh's gift is generous, but it also has an expiration date. Because the beginning of Exodus, it'll say there came a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. Only God gives an everlasting possession. Egypt is not the promise. Egypt is the place you pass through on the way to the promise. So Jacob is dying outside of the land of Canaan, and he is not confused about where the promise lives in Canaan. And this Eden blessing, which was given to Adam and passed to Noah, promised to Abraham, spoken over Isaac and Jacob, is now flowing into this room in Egypt and is about to be passed to another generation. But surprisingly, Jacob doesn't pass it first. He doesn't transfer the covenant blessing to his 12 sons. He starts with his grandsons. Look at verse 5. So now your 2 sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, they are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just like Reuben and Simeon. Now notice something here. Joseph brought Manasseh and Ephraim, the firstborn mentioned first, as you would expect. But Jacob reverses them when he speaks to Joseph. He says Ephraim and Manasseh, the younger before the older. He does it here in verse 5. He's going to do it again when he crosses his hand and blesses them. Something is already happening before a single hand is laid on a single head. What Jacob is doing is not emotional improvisation. It's a covenant transaction. Ephraim and Manasseh have the same standing as the sons, as his 12 sons. Full membership, full inheritance right. The comparison to Reuben and Simeon carries weight because they both acted in ways that cost them their position of honor as the first and second born. And here Jacob places grandsons at the same level as his other sons, not by right, not by birth order, but by the decision of the one who's holding the blessing. And this is how the blessing has always moved in Genesis. Tim Mackey in the class on Joseph from the Bible Project traces 7 inversions of the firstborn blessing in Genesis. First, land animals are created first, and then humans, but humans are exalted above them. Then Cain and Abel, the younger, is the chosen one. Then Japheth, Ham, and Shem. Shem is the last, the line of promise. Then Haran, Nahor, and Abraham. The youngest is the one that will carry the covenant. Then there's Ishmael and Isaac. The younger one will receive the blessing. Then there's Esau and Jacob. The younger steals what God was going to give to him anyway. And then we come to the 7th, which is always important, Manasseh and Ephraim. See, this pattern's not a literary accident. It's a theological declaration running through the entire book of Genesis. God does not work the way the world works. The world honors the firstborn, the strongest, the most obvious. God keeps reaching for the one that nobody counted on. Jacob names the younger first. He already knows what he's going to do with his hands, and we're going to talk more about the actual blessing and the switching of his hands next week. It's not just that God picks the unexpected person. It's also that he picks it in the unexpected nation. He's saying it's all mine. Look, these are Joseph's sons, but they were born in Egypt. Their mother is Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. On is called Heliopolis. It's the center of sun worship in Egypt. And the priests of On serve the god Ra, who is believed to be the sun god. These 2 boys have one grandfather who's the priest of the Egyptian sun god, and the other grandfather is Jacob. The Egyptian people were never the villains of the story. Pharaoh was. And here, before oppression even begins, Egypt is already woven into the tribes of Israel through these 2 boys. That's what Jacob is saying when he says, mine. This pattern doesn't just begin with Ephraim and Manasseh, and it doesn't end with them either. All 4 mothers of Israel are not Hebrews. Tamar was a Canaanite. We talked about her earlier in this series. The nations have been woven into the family of God from the very start, and that's going to continue forward in the biblical narrative. Rahab is a Canaanite woman in Jericho who's pulled into the family of Israel and named in the lineage of Yeshua. Ruth is a Moabite from the line of Lot. She chooses the God of Israel and the family of Naomi, and through her faithfulness, the line of Judah continues toward David. Caleb is a Kenizzite. He's actually from the family of Esau, not Jacob, but he marries into Judah, and he's one of only 2 from his generation who will enter the land of promise and receive his own inheritance. God keeps reaching outside the expected line, and 2 Egyptians are about to become 2 of the tribes of Israel. Mine, mine, mine. Verse 7. Now as for me, Jacob says, for when I came from Paddan to my sorrow, Rachel died along the way in the land of Canaan. And this highlighted phrase, to my sorrow, is the word alai. It means upon me. It's funny, the translators add the word grief or sorrow. It's not actually in the Hebrew, but the Hebrew, it actually says, Rachel died upon me. Rachel died upon me. It's about the weight of the loss that landed on Jacob when Rachel died and never lifted. And here's why this verse, it seems like an interruption in the narrative and in the story. He's talking about the blessing, and then he just says, and you know, it was because this whole loss landed on me years ago. Rachel died, leaving only 2 sons. Jacob gives Joseph 2 portions, or 2 tribes in her place. Robert Alter says he's giving her back what death took. And the numbers actually bear it out later in biblical history. By the first census in the wilderness, Ephraim and Manasseh combined number 75,900 people. It's larger than the tribe of Judah, which is the next largest tribe. And by the second census in the wilderness, their combined population has grown to 85,200. That's double. This is the double portion that Jacob gives Joseph out of love for Rachel. And it becomes the most fruitful branch of the entire nation. Grief turned into the most generative act in the whole story. And look at the rest of the verse. It says, while we were still a distance from entering Ephratah, I buried Rachel while we were still a distance from entering Ephrat, and buried her there on the way to Ephrat. That's Bethlehem. This is like the narrator is saying, and by the way, this will later be called Bethlehem. Wink, wink, right? Ephratah is Bethlehem. And Ephratah is from the root word parah, which means to be fruitful. Ephrat is from the same root as Ephraim, the boy named Fruitful, and the ground named Fruitfulness share the same word. Rachel is buried in the ground that carries her grandson's name. Or perhaps you could say her grandson carries the name of the ground where she was buried. Ephrat is also a name later in the Bible. Caleb, the Kenizzite from the line of Esau, he marries Ephrat from the tribe of Judah. And the place is named, she's named after the place. It's the town, she shares the same name as the town. Caleb enters the land alongside Joshua. This is so cool. I know I'm moving fast through a lot of things. But Caleb enters the land alongside Joshua, who's from the tribe of Ephraim. So Caleb grafted into the tribe of Judah, and Joshua from the tribe of Ephraim. The only 2 left from their entire generation are the ones that are going to lead all the tribes of Israel into the promised land together. The 2 lines that will dominate the rest of the biblical story are bound together throughout the story: Judah and Ephraim. And there's a later promise in Micah chapter 5, verse 1. But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, least among the clans of Judah, from you will come out to me one to be ruler in Israel, one whose goings forth are from of old, from the days of eternity. So by the time the prophet Micah writes, Ephratah has become another name for Bethlehem. So the place of Jacob's grief, the place whose name means fruitfulness. And the prophet looks at this small, unremarkable ground and says, something's going to come from this very seemingly insignificant spot. Someone is going to come from here. And the story, through the text, through the rest of the scriptures, Ruth is in Bethlehem, a Moabite woman who chooses the God of Israel and the family of Naomi. an outsider, pulled inside the promise. Through her faithfulness, the line of Judah continues towards David. And David is born in the same place, in Bethlehem, in Ephratah, the youngest of Jesse's sons. Jesse's lines up 7, oldest to youngest, and God passes over everyone. Nobody thought to call the youngest in from the field, and God says, no, it's the one who's with the sheep. The same pattern, the same ground. God takes the youngest and elevates him above his brothers. And Yeshua, our Messiah, born in Bethlehem, Ephratah, from the tribe of Judah, the son of David, born where Ephraim and Judah meet in the same soil, born at the place whose very name means fruitfulness, born exactly where Micah said he would be born in the place of Jacob's grief. He is the one in whom the fullness arrives. Not from one line only, but he holds all of the people of Israel in himself. The fruitfulness of Joseph through Ephraim and the royal authority of Judah in one person. The unexpected one. The youngest one becomes greater. The one nobody counted until God said that one. A Western thought wants us to choose. It can only be one or the other. Either insiders or outsiders. Either inclusive or exclusive. But Hebrew thought layers them. God works in the and. Egyptian and Israelite. Judah and Joseph. Grief and faith. Broken motive and real blessing. God keeps returning to Ephraim, to the place whose name means faithfulness, to the ground where Rachel was buried, and Caleb's wife was named, and Micah prophesied, and David was born, and Yeshua came into the world. Nothing wasted. Not the grief, not Rachel's death, not the half-Egyptian boys, not the youngest nobody called in from the field, not the sorrow of a dying old man doing the best he knows how. God weaves our broken grief into his unbroken purpose. The grief, the loss, the reunification of the family now in Jacob's death are all, God has been weaving them all together. And in verse 8, it says, then Israel saw Joseph's son and said, who are these? Now, it seems like a funny moment, like with my dad. You have a whole conversation, and then you say, and then you're in the middle of the story, my dad goes, who? Who are we talking about? That seems like that's what's happening here, but that's not what's actually happening. He's probably asking, one, he's partially blind, but really, Robert Alter suggests that in the ancient world, this question, who are these, is actually the first step in the adoption ceremony of the ancient Near East. The father's asked to identify and claim the children before witnesses. Jacob is not confused. He's following the form of the adoption ceremony which has just begun. In verse 9, Joseph said to his father, they are my sons, whom God has given me here. And then he said, please bring them to me, so I may bless them. And there it is again, the word barak. The word that started in a memory at Luz and blessed me is now an intention. Bring them so I may bless them. The blessing Jacob received is about to become the blessing that Jacob gives. Verse 10. Now Israel's eyes had grown heavy with old age, and he could not see. So he brought them near, and he kissed them and hugged them. Now this kiss and hug and embrace are not merely affection, they're also to reinforce the declaration of the adoptive process. They are part of the ceremony. There's a blind father and sons who are brought close to receive a blessing. And it's interesting because Jacob has been here before, but on the other side of it, his father Isaac was blind when he deceived him to steal his brother's blessing, the blessing of Esau. And now the tables are turned, and Jacob is blind, but there's no deception this time. Just two boys and a grandfather who knows exactly what he wants to do. Verse 11, then Israel said to Joseph, to see your face I didn't expect. And look, God has let me see your offspring as well. The face that he thought he would never see again, and now God has given him not only Joseph's face, but his children. What was lost has been returned, and more than returned, it's been doubled. We've talked about the word panim, face, in previous messages. We've watched this word move through this whole series. Jacob said to Esau, seeing your face is like seeing the face of God. Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, the hidden face made known. And now here, the face Jacob thought was gone forever, standing in front of him with children, two other faces. Verse 12, then he took them from his knees and bowed with his face down to the ground. Now, this phrase between his knees is important because it's a gesture of acceptance and adoption. It's actually the same thing when Bilhah bears her children on Rachel's knees. It's to be received there was to be claimed. It's part of the claim of adoption. And Tim Mackey points out that there's something hiding in the Hebrew. The word for knees is birkayim. It's the root word is barak, to bless. So the word for knees actually carries the word blessing inside of it. And before Jacob says a single word over these boys, they're already in the blessing, sitting on his knees, which sounds like blessing. It's the very word that describes holding them. Jacob can't clearly see them because he's blind. He cannot rise to greet them because he's old and dying, but he can receive them onto his knees into the blessing and say, they are mine. He didn't need to see their faces. He knew what to do. God weaves our broken grief into his unbroken purpose. Jacob didn't know that when he buried Rachel on the road to Ephrath, he didn't know these things would happen. He just knew the weight of the loss of his beloved wife. And I think the question for us today, for you, is what loss is weighing heavy on you? Now, most of us are carrying something right now. Maybe it's a loss or a transition that feels like loss, a version of your life that didn't go the way you planned. You may not even have words for it yet, but Jacob shows us what to do with it. I'm going to give you 3 things from this passage. The first is anchor in the word, not the wound. Jacob is dying in Egypt. Before he dies, anything else he recalls, he goes back to God's words at Bethel. When you are at the end of your strength and you have decisions to make, anchor your action in the word of God and the words that God speaks, not the wound. Look, the primary way that God speaks is through the Bible. You have to read it and memorize it and understand it and devour it and know it well enough that when you find yourself in the hardest moments of your life, you can do what Jacob does here. You can quote it back. And when the Holy Spirit gives you a word, a phrase, a sentence, I want to encourage you to write it down somewhere. I have a note in my journal on my phone. And when God speaks, I write down the words because I don't want my interpretation to change the words. I want to remember the words themselves, and you're going to forget them, but the words are the anchor. Grief is loud and persuasive, and it will tell you what to do next. Don't let it. Go back to what God said first. 2, God meets you in your grief. Jacob never set his grief down. It was still upon him when he pulled 2 half-Egyptian boys onto his knees and spoke the covenant over him. God didn't wait for him to finish grieving. God met him where he was, and he will do the same for you. Grief is not only death. It's a marriage that's ended. It's the child who walked away. It's the dream that didn't happen. It's the version of your life that you thought you would be living by now. Loss takes many forms, and unprocessed loss shapes us in ways that we cannot always see from the inside. So you have to name your grief honestly. What was lost? What it cost you? what is still on you, the weight that's still on you. And don't grieve alone. Share your grief with people you trust. Grief carried alone becomes grief that controls us. Find safe people and let them in to your grief and be vulnerable with your grief. The third is look for the fruit in the hard place. When you find yourself with things weighing heavy on you, you have to look for the fruit in the hard place. Joseph named his son Ephraim before any of this was resolved. He named what God was doing while he was still in the middle of it. And Jacob was literally blind. He couldn't even see their faces, but he could see what God was doing. It's not fruit after the hard place. It's not fruit despite the hard place. It's fruit in the hard place. For those who are in a hard place right now, still some distance from where you thought you would be, I want you to know that God is not waiting until you're out of it for you to be fruitful through you. He's still working in the hard place right now. So name the fruit in the hard place. What is God growing in you right now that you have not yet named? Maybe it's patience, compassion, depth, wisdom, things that could not have come any other way. Name them. The fruit in the land of affliction is still fruit. You may not be able to see it right now, but you know what to do. Go back to what God said. Don't carry grief alone. Name what He's growing in you in this process. Look, God has been weaving your story as He weaves the story. He is still weaving your story now. And it is a beautiful story, even while you find yourself in a hard place. I love you guys, and I hope you'll come back as we continue this series together.